Hello, welcome to the circuit of the community of Valencia in the southeast corner of Spain. We're about 10 miles from the Mediterranean Sea, 23 degrees, and the sunshine is beaming down on the pit lane. And beaming down particularly now as we look towards the first qualifying session of this opening round of the FIA GT Championship. On the pace setters, you just saw them first car in the pit lane. That's Julian Bailey in the Lister Storm. Lister, who took on the might of the Orica Run Chrysler Viper team last year in the championship, hoping to have a little bit better fortune and a bit more reliability in this FIA GT series for the new 2000. New classes to talk about, new drivers, new cars as well. Plenty to entertain us during this first of two qualifying sessions this afternoon here live on Eurosport. Well, good afternoon. I'm Martin Haven, and we've been looking with interest at a whole bunch of new cars and colours here in Valencia, and of course most fabulous of all of them, although perhaps it's not going to be the most spectacular in terms of speed. Finally, there is a Ferrari in the championship. The new Ferrari 550 Millennio, which is regarding this race clearly as very much a test session. They haven't had much testing at all with the brand new car. It looks excellent. It is, of course, as you would expect, bright red. And it'll sound great today as well once they get it running, because they turned up here with full catalytic converters in their exhausts, as per the regulations, only to discover that nobody else bothered with that, and so they have spent the overnight time taking those out. There you can see the three-strong Paul Belmondo Racing team of Chrysler Vipers, along with Hugh Chamberlain, who was one of last year's front-runners behind the Orica teams. That is expected to be one of the pace-setting crews. Pace-setting also should come from the Lister Storm team. The V12 5-litre Jaguar engined cars were fastest and third fastest in free practice on Friday, and they are very much dialed into the circuit. Expect also perhaps some fireworks from Cor Oizer. He may well make a shot for pole position, possibly not in this early afternoon session when the track temperature is high. The ambient here is about 23 degrees, as I mentioned. But possibly later on in the afternoon when we come back at 5:30 to 6:30, that looks like being the quicker of the two sessions, purely because the air will be cooler and denser and the track temperatures won't take quite so much out of the tyres. Well, we've got a large field of GT2 cars here, now referred to solely as the GT cars. There is no more GT1 category in the FIA Championship, of course. And we have got a new class as well. It's called NGT. To you and I, it's GT3. To the Americans, it's the GT category. Yes, it's all very confusing, isn't it? Essentially, it's a field of Porsche GT3Rs, the brand new GT3 car that Porsche built in 1999, and which stormed its way past the stalwarts of BMW's M3 cars to victory in the American Le Mans Series. I don't think the Formula One inshore powerboats will have much to say about this qualifying session, but a bizarre addition to the inside of this race circuit. Brand new circuit, of course, the circuit of the community of Valencia. Its first race was the inaugural round of the FIM World Road Racing Motorcycle Championships. The Grand Prix of the community of Valencia was the inaugural race of this track, and it produced some spectacular motorcycle action. For cars like these, it's a little bit of a tight and twisty track. They only get a kilometre-long straight to stretch their legs on, but still, it's quite a demanding place for the racers, particularly the big front-engine cars, and we're thinking here, of course, the Vipers and the Listers, rather than including the Ferrari in there. They may well find themselves struggling for outright pace. There is the number 14 car. That is the lead Lister entry. The Newcastle United colours, black and white, and that multicoloured Dayglow effort on the back as well from their new sponsors. The 15 car there, sitting ready to go as well, as we're about to go for the first of two qualifying sessions this afternoon for this opening round of the FIA GT Series, as Roland Brunserrider, the clerk of the course, prepares to let it all loose. Eurosport live at the community of Valencia circuit, just outside the city of Valencia, for the opening round of the FIA GT Championship in the year 2000. Well, a series that looked like it might have been on a terminal slide over the last couple of years, having lost factory support of Porsche and Mercedes, has really come back to life this season. And the 2000 series has got new entries, new teams, new weight in numbers, and some interesting new machinery. Right in the centre of the picture there, you can see the fastest car in practice, the Newcastle United Lister Storm, car number 14, driven by Julian Bailey and his British teammate, Jamie Campbell-Walter. Now, they were the class of the GT1 field in the British GT Championship last year. They have abandoned all their GT interests in Great Britain, realistically, to concentrate on this FIA series. And they will be looking here for a good, solid race. Reliability above all, to get confidence in the car and in the team in this new championship, and to get some points on the board. Pole position, says Lawrence Pierce, the Lister team boss, not important to us. Neither, he says, necessarily are we going to shoot for victory. Well, we want to get both cars home, both sets of drivers thoroughly bedded in and strong in the belief that they can do what they need to in this championship to take victory. Well, Roland Brunsterrider, the clerk of the course, holding the cars for the last couple of moments. Julian Bailey in the car, setting the fastest time in the Lister, and it was against the wealth of Chamberlain and Belmondo Racing Viper opposition that they set that time. 3 cars from the Paul Belmondo Racing team and 2 cars from Hugh Chamberlain's effort. In fact, the fastest of the Vipers is run by a team that was only assembled this month. And don't forget, we're only in the 25th of this month. It's run from a small island off the coast of Holland by Carsport Holland. It's essentially a group of ex-Orica and ex-other sports car engineers. The chief engineer in the team ran the Orica team in the American Le Mans Series last year as their chief engineer. And that car, the Carsport Holland car, with Mike Hazemans and his Dutch colleague David Hart, who is familiar to Eurosport viewers from his efforts in the Ferrari Porsche Challenge. They have put themselves second on the free practice timesheets. Now, they're running an ex-Orica car that was run for Dominic Dupuis at the Daytona 24 Hours. It's that recent a race car. But they are running older tyre sizes than a lot of the lots of the ex-Works Chrysler Vipers, like the Belmondo cars. You can see the yellow and white machines. And it may just be that they have got a slightly different tyre setup on the Carsport Holland machine that may allow them to have a bit of a shot at pole position. We'll see as the session progresses whether they show that turn of speed. It's more likely that the afternoon session in the cool of the afternoon, which starts just after 5:30 Central European time, 4:30 on British Eurosport and Portugal and in Ireland, and that is likely to be the quicker of the pair of sessions. Temperatures here at Valencija in 22-23 degree region of air temperature, and you can add about another 10 degrees to that in terms of track temperature. It's been warm and sunny all day long, just little scatterings of tiny white clouds and haze in the air, but nothing much to disrupt the sun doing its work since early this morning. The 12 car you're looking at here, the Paul Belmondo entry, is of Paul Belmondo himself and Vincent Vos, who was in the GLPK team last year, raced the Chrysler Viper in the FIA GT series with some considerable verve. You may well remember the red, white and blue FINA coloured car. Well, he joins Paul Belmondo, actor Jean-Paul Belmondo, of course, the French screen idol of the 60s and 70s, is Paul's father. Paul, like Vincent Vos, a top-line single-seater driver, never quite got the opportunity to make his mark in the top line of single-seaters in Formula 1, but he raced in Formula 3000 for a number of years and has really found his spiritual home here in this FIA GT series. His team has grown in stature and experience and competence, and they were very much challengers to the outright pace of the Orica-run Vipers last year, as were the cars from Chamberlain Engineering. And when they ventured into the FIA series, the team Lister Storm entries as well. Well, there are 2 of them this year. They will be doing all the races. This is the 14 car, Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter, familiar to viewers in the UK from their exploits in the British GT series, and they're eschewing that now and moving from the car that outwardly looked pretty much identical to that, the GT1 Lister Storm, to the GT2 version of the car, which is the lead category in this year's FIA GT Championship. Well, they were fastest in the overall timesheets. In fact, they were fastest in both sessions yesterday. The first session, the warmer of the two, in the heat of the afternoon, 135.6 was the fastest lap, and they slashed an entire lap, almost to the 100th of an entire second, almost to the 100th of that in the afternoon, 134.6. So certainly no doubt in the fact that they are getting quicker as they dial themselves in. The second car, incidentally, with a three-strong driver lineup. Nicholas Springer, the German driver, with Peter Hardman, who last raced cars of this caliber at Le Mans 3 or 4 years ago when he was partnering the likes of Derek, Justin Bell and Andy Wallace in the Harrods McLarens. And Carlos Palau, the Spaniard, who is a front runner in the Spanish GT Championship as well. So pretty experienced lineup in car 14, and Lawrence Pierce reckons that they are the two quickest drivers out there, Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter, and he would not be drawn on which he thought was ultimately going to be the quicker. Experience has proved over the course of the British Series that it was generally Julian Bailey, but then of course he is the established star name, and Jamie Campbell-Walter in his first year in a GT car, having moved up from the TBR Championship to something with considerably more weight and horsepower, and great degree of pressure on him. I think he felt a couple of times, responded to it very well indeed, and never found wanting in terms of speed, courage or sticking ability either in the car. And Jamie certainly has come on very strong indeed with the team, and it is a very, very evenly balanced pairing in terms of qualifying and race speed. It's going to be a very hard car to beat. Second car, well, Nicholas Springer has got a bit of experience at this level. Peter Hardman not for the last 2 or 3 years. Carlos Palau probably the more experienced of the lineup there. But again, the car in its black and red Texaco Havoline colours, very much like the Winston Cup NASCAR and kart colours that we're so used to seeing. And that car is pretty quick as well. They were third fastest in practice, and they were just some 0.6 of a second slower than the lead machine. There's one of Hugh Chamberlain's 2 cars. They're carrying the number 1 and 2 plates this year. Not quite sure how Hugh got himself so far up the queue to nab those numbers that weren't being used by the Orica team, which of course won the championship. But nonetheless, Chamberlain is running number 1 and number 2 machines here in Valencia. New name, new colour scheme for this Viper, the 21 car run by the Italian Racing Box outfit. Luca Capillari, who has raced with Hugh Chamberlain as recently as Daytona, Gabriele Mazzuzzi and Raffaele Signolo. And they, of course, in the ubiquitous Chrysler Viper GTSR, the lightweight version of the coupe that Chrysler first brought into racing now about 6 years ago. It's hard to think that the Chrysler Viper is actually a 10-year-old design now. The RT10, the semi-open roadster, which first launched Viper fever on the world, about to be replaced in the year 2002 by a svelte and swoopy-looking machine. And already Hugh Chamberlain's cars drawing the cameras to themselves. It mentioned to Hugh that if he went out when it was a little bit quiet on track, he might get plenty of exposure. Not quite sure who is at the wheel of the 2 car, but I'm not sure that that was exactly what they were hoping for in terms of exposure. Spin for the number 10 Paul Belmondo racing machine. That's run by Paul Belmondo for young Frenchman Guy Martinol and Jean-Claude Lanier. And here's a replay of his spin. Pretty harmless stuff. As you can see, lots and lots and lots of runoff area here at the circuit of the community of Valencia. It boasts a kilometre and a little bit longer straight. Out of the first turn, they then climb uphill into long, sweeping left-hand series of corners that get tighter and slower as they come downhill. And there is reiteration of the fact that crews in the pits need to be wearing full fire suits and eye protection and helmets for the refueling crews as well. And there are penalties for any that don't. Here is a familiar colour scheme of the Felbermeyers, father and son combination from Austria, who have been in the championship now since 1998, 97 in fact, in their GT2 Porsche. One of the pair of Freisinger Porsches there in the middle of that group of 3 of the German machines. Wolfgang Kaufmann and Bob Wallach sharing that one. And both the Freisinger machines shuttling around between 5 and 6 speed gearbox in the practice session. They weren't quite sure which they were going to go with. And behind them a pair of GT3Rs, the 54 car of the Noel Del Bello racing team, and the 66 Mack racing car. Both of them in the NGT class. Just to let you know what's going on around the track at the moment, fastest car so far has been Cor who shares his Marcos this year with Christian Van, one of the Chamberlain drivers from last year. And they had a number of problems in the free practice sessions on Friday. The engine, which ran perfectly 2 days earlier when they gave it a little shakedown in Holland, was running ferociously rich on Friday. So they were going back to the management, scratching their heads with biros and wondering what on earth was going on. Second quickest was the 12 car we saw spinning earlier on, the Paul Belmondo Vincent Voss machine. Third quickest is another of the Belmondo racing cars. That's the 11 car. That is shared by Claude-Yves Gosselin, who is a long-time sports car racer, particularly in the lower categories, the GT2 and GT3 categories with Porsche, and ex-Formula 3000 driver Boris de Richebourg. And the Belmondo racing team seemed very impressed indeed with de Richebourg's speed. He had a couple of years in the David Sears run outfit in Formula 3000, and it's clear that he was not quite as quick as his teammates in either of those 2 seasons, but he did show a fair turn of speed in the number 11 car during practice. And the Belmondo racing team, I think, have got somebody that they feel pretty happy with in that car at the moment. Coming in then the 3 car, the Pricing and Motorsport machine, that currently lies 5th in the timings. Fastest lap at the moment now being taken by the Gosselin number 11 machine that we were just talking about with Boris de Richebourg. As this is the colour scheme now of the second of the Lister Storms, the 15 car. Nicholas Springer, Peter Hardman and Carlos Palau. They at the moment are lying in 10th fastest, just ahead of their teammates Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter, who have only done 3 laps. Everybody's being very circumspect with the number of laps at the moment, just picking up a bit more information about temperature and how it works on the car and how it works on the tyres. Fastest lap is a 1:35.8, and the fastest car in unofficial practice, Julian Bailey, is 12th quickest at 1:42.2. So he's got some way yet to find in terms of driver pace, I think, and pushing the car to go to the top of the tables. So the Belmondo Vipers, number 11 car that you're looking at the moment, currently fastest. Cor car in second place by just 0.26 of a second. And in third place, the second of the Belmondo cars, in fact the third of the Belmondo cars, for Paul Belmondo and Vincent Voss. They're third fastest, ahead of the number 21 Racing Box Chrysler Viper for Capillari, Mattiuzzi and Sangiolo. And then in 5th and 6th place, the best of the 2 Porsches, Kaufmann and Wallach in their car. And in 6th position, the Franz Conrad racing car, which is down for Franz Conrad and Jürgen von Gartzen. But Jürgen von Gartzen isn't here this weekend. So Franz Conrad doing most of the driving at the moment. And he is currently 6th fastest. We return with more from Valencia live on Eurosport in just a second. Eurosport live in Valencia for the opening qualifying session of the FIA GT Series for 2000. The Circuit of Community of Valencia, the place where Lister hope to stamp their mark on the championship. This is the second of the 2 Lister Storms that the Works team is running here throughout this FIA Series. And here, the first sight on track of the newest machine in the championship. We've seen the Lister Storms before, but we have not seen a Ferrari 550 Millennio. This is run by First Racing, the ex-Formula 3000 outfit of Fabien Giroir, himself a former Formula 3000 driver, and he is sharing that car with one of the drivers who drove for him in the 16 car is Jean-Denis Delatraz, the Swiss driver who drove for Fabien Giroir's First Racing outfit when he himself was a 3000 pilot. Well, a couple of stories about the Ferrari, not least its lack of development. They had big problems when they had a couple of days testing earlier on the end of last month. They had piston burnout problems, and that meant they got very little running done indeed. This is an entirely outside of the factory effort. The new rules in the FIA Championship allow you to choose a car that you think will make a good GT car and go out and build one. It doesn't have to be made by Ferrari. You can get it homologated yourself. And as a result, this car and Cor Marcos are both completely different from anything that the factory has produced. What you do need to do, though, is go and build a road car of it. Well, let's tell you a little bit about this car. Of course, it's the straightforward Ferrari V12 motor, and they reckon it's producing somewhere around 565, 570 horsepower at the moment from its 6-litre V12, normally aspirated, of course, engine in the front and driving from the rear wheels, and yesterday sliding in spectacular four-wheel drift style, particularly out of this final corner. The long left-hander that leads onto the main straight at the Community of Valencia circuit here is a downhill, tightening, and then opening out again left-hander, and it makes for very spectacular watching. The Ferrari riding the curbs, and again there, as you can see, going into the first turn, riding the curbs on the exit. It seemed yesterday as though Fabien Girouard and his co-driver, the Swiss Jean-Denis Delatraz, were really having to steer the car as much with the throttle as with the front wheel. Well, that probably explains why they were languishing down the timesheets. That's also partly explained by a small fire that the car had, and they switched it off at the back of the circuit halfway through yesterday afternoon session because of smoke trailing into the cockpit. Turned out that it was because they were trying to run their exhausts with catalytic converters in. Now, that's actually demanded in the regulations. Quite simply, though, nobody bothers with that. The organisers don't bother checking it, and the teams don't bother running them, and everybody has sort of had this gentleman's agreement that they think this car sounds much better and much more exciting without catalytic converters strangling the noise, and hence Ferrari's V12 bellowing much more loud and proud this afternoon than it was doing throughout yesterday's practice sessions. A little bit more about the car coming to light over the last couple of days. It's entirely built by First Racing. They had some problems in the scrutineering. They had mounted their radiator in the front of the car on carbon fibre mountings, which they hadn't actually done when they got the car homologated, so they saved themselves a couple of kilos there, but it was instantly spotted, and they had to put some, hurriedly fabricate some aluminium mountings for them for the radiator in the front end of the car. So that little hiccup has been passed, and at the moment their best time leaves them 8th on the timesheets. Now, bearing in mind that there's probably not an awful lot of outright going for pole or going for gold on at the moment, still that's considerably more respectable than a brand new, it's barely turned a wheel box, out-of-the-box car might have the expectation of. Certainly, Fabien Girouard this morning was saying that they're really regarding this as an extended test session and nothing more. If they can get to the end of the race, they will consider that to be a moral victory for the brand new machine. Confusingly similar in colour, but very different in sound, and when it gets close to the camera in shape, is this car. Now, this is the car that was second quickest in yesterday's joint timesheets. The 25 machine, run by Car Sport Holland, a brand new team, assembled essentially like the car in the last 3 or 4 weeks. David Hart and his team have been responsible for running his highly modified Porsches in the Porsche Ferrari Challenge, and with a great degree of success he's been run, but the car is owned and run by Twan Hazemans with his son Mike, and that's the Car Sport Holland entry there, the red Oreca Viper, or former Oreca Viper. So the Dodge machine, and that is currently lying further down the timesheet than my timing screen will give me recourse to on the first page, so we'll pick up that one in a moment. But they had a pretty good turn of speed in practice, and it would be very surprising indeed if they failed to reproduce that. In fact, this is their first lap out of the pits, so it's that new a car that they have obviously had some problem this afternoon that has prevented them running so far. Gyration there from one of the GT I'm going to have to get used to saying this, one of the NGT cars, the Porsche GT3Rs. That is the Chero car. The Chero racing team, familiar to anybody who has watched any French GT racing on Eurosport, or indeed ever seen any pictures from Le Mans, because the Chero name has been around and about Le Mans for a long while. 64, in fact, gyrating there was not that car. A similar colour scheme for Thierry Perrier, Jean-Paul Richard, and double Le Mans winner Gérard Larousse, 59 years of age. That team, the 64 car you saw spinning, boasting the oldest driver lineup in the category. They're pretty pleased to announce nobody younger than 50 in their lineup. Well, there you see the current state of affairs with Peter Hardman, we saw just after the break, at the wheel of the number 15 Lister Storm, going fastest so far. Into the pits comes the geriatrics car, number 64 in the NGT category. At the moment, Lister is quickest. Coming down the pit lane is the number 15 car that currently has the fastest time, and out goes the Marcos. Now this is the LM600 Evolution version, if you like, the Coroiser Evolution version. Coroiser has been plying his trade developing this Marcos for the last 3 or 4 years, racing in the FIA GT category and pretty much everywhere else they hold GT races. You'll see these cars in the British GT Championship. Coroiser will be running a car with Callum Lockie in the British Series, and indeed Callum Lockie is already in the car this weekend at Thruxton, and he will be joined by Coroiser for non-clashing races. But this car with pretty good chance of making a run for pole position, I think, later on in this afternoon session, as the Ferrari goes back into the first racing garage. And it does look every bit as nice under the bonnet and under the skin as you might expect. Fabien Girouard's first racing team may not know an awful lot about this machine as a GT car. They're just starting out on that path, but they certainly know an awful lot about making it look the business. With a crackle black cylinder head covers under the bonnet, this long expanse of V12, well, all this induction ducting really looks pretty impressive. It doesn't look as though it's been shoehorned in quite as much as the 5.9 litre Chevrolet V8 does in the Marcos. The Marcos, a tiny frame of a car with its huge muscular wheel arches and wide-bodied stance. And the 5.9 litre engine being used by the team this weekend. They reckon it's about 100 horsepower down in power on the 8 litre Vipers. And you can imagine, with giving away at least 2 litres in terms of capacity, that might well be the case. They do have recourse to a 6.9 litre engine. They used it a couple of times last year in the Marcos, and without too much success. It seemed to keep running into reliability problems. Probably not least concerned with overheating such a phenomenal power plant in such a tiny car. But even with the 6.9, Coroiser reckons they're at least 50 horsepower down on a half-decent Chrysler Viper, of which, of course, there are a great number of more than half-decent Chrysler Vipers around. But that won't stop him or teammate Christian Van trying to have a shot at setting a fastest time. And it is the Dutchman, ex-Formula 3, ex-pretty much any category you like to mention, Cornelius Oyser, who is driving the car at the moment, and I'm sure we will see him making a bid for pole later on. Last minute save there by that Porsche. That was right on the exit of the final turn. That's Franz and Nico Weiss from Germany running in that 911 GT2 machine in the very deceptive turning and braking area that goes on for a good half a kilometre. There's the final long left-hander, and he was just catching himself out. Managed to somehow save it on the apex, and just exited before he hit the curbs and off into the huge beach of gravel there. Back with Coroiser, spitting flame and smoke on the overrun out of the Marcos. And at the moment, his countrymen, Mike Hasemans and David Hart, are second fastest in the red Chrysler Viper, but the Springer Hardman Palau car is still on top of the timesheets, courtesy of Peter Hardman. Coroiser not hanging around now. The circuit is relatively free of traffic. And he is currently lying in 4th place on his last lap. 1:35.1 is the time he's hoping to beat. And as he goes across the line, 1:36.401, but that was his first lap out of the pits, so that's not a bad showing at all. .1:36.091 is his fastest lap, so that was just 4/10 away from that. And looks as though he could be trying to put in a bit of a quick run. Maybe seeing one as well now from the 25 car. Apologies incidentally for the technical glitch, which is almost completely depriving you of on-screen graphics. You've seen a couple of little inserts there from MST Sports Timing, and with them coming on board as the new timing and scoring body for the championship this year, and new TV production team as well for this year. Obviously, as with the new cars, there are the few little teething glitches to be ironed out, and I'm sure the people at MST are working as hard as possible to try and get us something on screen. Let's have a look at the number 1 Chamberlain bike then, Lee Anarim and Stephen Watson. Thank you, MST, there you go. They seem to have solved that little glitch for a moment, and the clock's running on them. Stephen Watson from South Africa. British viewers may remember him from the Formula 3 Championship. Started off with Fred Goddard Racing, a fellow South African, and did a couple of years in British F3, did a couple of years in Formula 3000 as well, and he's been a test driver for the last 2 years. He's an Arrows test driver. He hasn't yet, he says, got his hands on the brand new Arrows, but he's certainly been around at the tests, and he has witnessed the smiles of Pedro Della Rosa when he first drove the car, and Della Rosa came back in after 5 laps of an icy Silverstone and said, wow, this is a racing car, what were we driving before? Well, Stephen Watson has been busy doing Formula 1 testing for the last 2 years, hasn't raced anything for the last 2 years, but he's out in that car with Lee Anarim, who of course is the Portuguese driver who drove for Hugh Chamberlain last year. The EMI colours of the MK Racing team you saw very quickly there. Steve O'Rourke and Tim Sugden, all British pairing, run by Michael Caine of GTC fame, who ran the Gulf McLarens in the BPR Championship, I beg your pardon. And this is another all-British team as well, who, like Steve O'Rourke and Tim Sugden and the MK Racing crew, raced in the British Series last year. A pair of cars here from G-Force with their Pennzoil and Raft as sponsors coming into the European Championship. Magnus Wallander, who was the thorn in the side of Lister last year in his G-Force Porsche GT1 in the British Series. He shares the car with the son of the owner of Caterham Cars, Robert Nern, who is turning himself into a pretty mean sports car driver. And in the second car, Nigel Smith and Michel Neugarten, who has spent a lot of time in Porsches in the GT2 category. They're both in GT3 cars, the NGT category, and at the moment you're looking at the Smith and Neugarten machine, number 51. They're both absolutely identical. Had a bit of a little word with the team about that, so you can now see they've got tiny little green day-glow patch on the light of the 51 car and a tiny little orange day-glow patch on the light of the 50 car, which as soon as it gets sunny you can't see at all. So we will always get those two confused. Their colour schemes are absolutely identical, and the raft of motor trade sponsors that they've got on board, who have been with the G-Force team, John Greasy's operation, for the last 5 or 6 years. A number of them, Blue Coral and Pennzoil and Slick 50, coming into the FIA Championship here. It's going to be a bit of an uphill learning year for them, they reckon, but they're not worried by that. Not worried by that little spin either is the Harbitor Racing, the number 9 car, Patrick Viome, who raced for Harbitor for the last couple of seasons, and he has been joined in that car by Jacques Courbet, the Frenchman, and for this race, Paco Orti, Spaniard. This is the car that currently holds the fastest time, incidentally, set on its last lap, 1:34.024. Cameras didn't pick that up when he was out on his fast lap, and coming into the pits now, I suspect probably Julian Bailey behind the wheel. A little bit hard to tell. I think it may well have been him in the number 14 Newcastle United Lister Storm. Still can't quite tell. An awful lot of shadow, I'm afraid, and Julian and Jamie Campbell-Walter's helmets are not wildly dissimilar in their basic colouring. Across the line he comes again. Let's see when he gets there if we can tell you exactly what he's doing. Only one timing beacon out on the circuit here, so we have to wait for him to get to the start-finish straight to tell you. At the moment he is fastest though. The Hazelmans and Hart Red Viper is second quickest. Oops. And the new Slimline NGT GT3R number 77, not quite as slim as its driver had imagined, and off, and very substantially off, he forces the Cycle Motorsport machine, Francis Werner and Jacques Piatier in that one. Don't know which of the pair is at the wheel there, but I imagine that he will certainly be making his presence very felt in the RWS garage. So Bailey and Campbell-Walter fastest from Hazelmans and Hart. Springer and Hardman in the second of the Lister Storms in third place. The Gosselin car, number 11, the best of the Paul Belmondo Racing Vipers, is in fourth position. Fifth place is Kohlreuser and Christian Vance Marcos. In sixth place, the number 12 Paul Belmondo Viper with Belmondo and Vincent Voss. And coming back to the pits with a slightly damaged car and a full head of steam, I imagine, is the 32 car. Well, that's the way the times look at the moment. Still 15 minutes and more of qualifying here in Valencia. Back in just a moment. Eurosport live at the opening round of the FIA GT Championship for 2000 here at the Circuit of the Community of Valencia. Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter's Lister Storm, currently the fastest car here by 0.3 of a second. They've now done 10 laps. They're still out on track looking for a quick time. Mike Hazelmans and David Hart's Chrysler Viper GTS, which was second quickest in free practice to the car that currently heads it in timed practice. They have only done 6 laps, and the car has been parked for a long while in the garage. They seem pretty happy with their setup, clearly. Out again goes the Marcos, out again goes the 15 car. That is the second of the Lister Storms. Not to be confused with the car that is currently top of the time sheets. They're only third in times, 1.3 seconds away. Peter Hardman coming back out in the car. He set the time last time out, and the English driver will go again and look to see if he can improve their setup a little. Didn't seem to be a huge amount of changes going on the car. Well, we were away at break. They were just putting the tyres back on, so we didn't see an awful lot going on. Perhaps they may have been waiting for a gap in traffic. I think they may have missed their opportunity 2 or 3 minutes ago. There was barely a car out on the circuit. Now everybody seems to have got their second wind. Obviously word has spread down the pit lane that we were away on a break, and now we're back. Bailey and Campbell-Walter fastest then. Hazelman and Hart second in the red Chrysler Viper. Ferrari's back out on track, incidentally, and it's dropped down the order a little bit. The Fabien Giroir and Jean-Denis Delatraz Ferrari 550 Millennio. There it is, speak of the devil. It is 16 in number and 14th in position, 4.3 seconds away from the fastest car, but they've only done 9 laps. I'm sure they'll be hoping to get as many under their belt as possible. The car that's done the most currently lies in 4th place on the timing sheets, behind the 2 Listers and the best of the Vipers, and that is car 11. The second best of the Vipers, Claude-Yves Gosselin and Boris de Richebourg. And from our elevated position here, 4 stories above the pit lane. I'm afraid can't tell you which of them is in there, but you can see the Ferrari there, and thundering as opposed to howling across the line behind him comes Qual Marcos on its first lap out of the pits. Plenty of action here. Ferrari being steered over the curbs again with the throttle there, as you can see, by Jean-Denis Delatraz, and they're hoping to really put some miles on this car this weekend. Fabien Gillois saying that a finish would be absolutely perfect for them, because it'll give them 3 hours of running with the car if it does make it all the way through near as damaged, and that will be considerably more than they've had in total so far. It really is a vertical learning curve for these guys. Every time they go out in the car in testing or here on the track, they are trying a new component or a new setup or something. They were working on wing angles this morning. The rear wing there, you can see big upright stanchions to keep it out of the airflow off the roof, and they were actually bothering about wing angle setting, and it seems as though that seems to have done some work, although he's using plenty of room on the curbs to steer the Ferrari around. It's certainly not as crossed up coming out of the corners as it was in Friday's free practice sessions. Qual behind him will give us a useful yardstick as to how the Ferrari is or isn't progressing. Comes into the pits after the final turn, and thundering across the line comes the big V8. 5th in the timings at the moment. No improvement since he came out of the pits for Qual. 1:36.09 compared to 1:33.82 for the fastest car, which is still the 14 Lister Storm of Bailey and Campbell Walter. Springer and Hardman, who we saw leaving the pit in the Texaco car. Peter Hardman has moved that up now to 2nd, so Lawrence Pierce's cars 1st and 2nd of the 2 Lister Storms. 3rd place is the Dutch Viper. 4th place is the Gosselin de Richebourg Viper, which is being run by Paul Belmondo, and in 5th place is the Sol Marcos in the field. 6th place, the 2nd Belmondo Viper for Belmondo and Voss. 7th place now, the best of Hugh Chamberlain's cars, Tony Seiler, the Swiss, who drove for him last year, and Walter Brunn. Yes, that Walter Brunn, the 59-year-old former slot machine magnate, the Austrian Swiss driver, I beg your pardon, who not only ran, of course, his own teams in the heydays of the Porsche 956 and 962 era of sports car racing in Group C, and very successfully as well, drove and engineered his own cars, and then of course went on with the ill-fated Eurobrunn into Formula One, and financially that destroyed him. And Walter Brunn has said for a number of years, I want to come back to racing. I will not come back to racing, however, while I owe anybody any money. And he is back for the first time in a car run by Hugh Chamberlain, looking joyful, happy and fit, if considerably poorer than he has probably ever been in his entire life. He sold everything. He sold the huge empire of slot machine franchises that he had. He sold all his property. He sold his collection of racing cars, his collection of road cars, what was reputed to be a fairly prodigious wine cellar. Went under the auctioneer's hammer as well. And Valti has been, trying to pay off the debts from the Eurobrunn incident, as with a number of people over the last 10 or 15 years getting badly burnt by Formula One. Well, he's back, and good to see him back with Tony Seiler, and that should be an interesting combination in the number 2 Chamberlain Viper. Again, you're looking here at the 2nd fastest car. They were 1.3 behind Bailey and Campbell Walter when they left the pits, and 3 laps later they're 0.44 behind. And so the Springer, Hardman and Palau line up in this machine. And that is Nicholas Springer, I think now, from the helmet colours in the car. Peter Hardman having done the earlier running, and of course just showing the difference in speed between the fastest and the not quite so fast out there. Yes, close enough to the tail of Franz Conrad's number 5 car, but not that close. So the number 15 Lister Storm having a narrow miss with the back of Franz Conrad's car. If he'd had the headlamps on, it would have melted the paint on the back bumper of the number 5 machine. Conrad's car, incidentally, with a very changed colour scheme here, predominantly silver, with that bright yellow colouring from the Hella light sponsorship that he has. Of course, we've been so used to seeing his cars dark blue, that sort of aqua pale blue and white over the years that it's almost impossible to recognise it in any other colours. Here's one of Chamberlain's cars, and this is the number 1 car. They're 8th on the timesheets. Lee Anarim and Stephen Watson being outpaced at the moment by Tony Seiler and Walter Brunn, who are 7th in the number 2 Chamberlain Viper. The Conrad car, incidentally, as we see the number 15 car overcooked in bizarre position. Considerably some distance from the exit of the corner. No, not that far distant from the exit of the corner. It was going wrong on the way in, wasn't it? And it never got any righter as he tried to get it round. Well, a harmless half spin to car and driver may not have helped the tyres much. Here's where he realises it's all wrong. He's counter-steering as he tries to break it through the corner. And just a little dirty excursion there onto the curb backwards. Select first gear and off we go again, and hope that he hasn't threateningly bitted the tyres too much. Said it was Nicholas Springer. It does still look like Peter Hardman's helmet, so we may have to mark that one down a little bit. I don't think he's done that in a D-type in the last few years, Peter Hardman, but there you go. Perhaps not quite so friendly to rear-wheel steering as the D-type Jaguars he raced in his historic racing in the UK. Well, continuing with a few little bits and pieces, Franz Conrad driving here with another, German legend really of sports car racing. Jürgen von Gartzen has been associated with the 911 for 20 years and more. Any more than that, I'm sure he wouldn't like to admit to, but we'll have to. Jürgen von Gartzen, a long time stalwart of Porsche racing in his native land in Germany, and of course all over the European and world sports car racing scene. So he's sharing that car number 5 with Franz Conrad that we saw the 14 car there nearly run into the back of. And here is the Belmondo car number 10. 3 cars from Belmondo Racing, all identically liveried with that yellow and double white stripe effort. Dear, and obviously clearly not day-glow coloured enough for the Marcus driver to have seen him. Not sure if that's Koroyzer at the wheel or if that might be Christian Van out in the car now. Whatever, it's back in the pits. Timesheets at the moment showing the Lister Storm speed advantage there. Just 1/10 of a second though, separating the 15 cars, Springer, Hardman and Palau, from Hazelmans and Hart in the Dutch Viper. And here we have a pair of Vipers, the 10 car. Let's run down the lineup of that in the head of that little group, or that pair. Guy Martinol and Jean-Claude Lanier. And the Racing Box car number 21. Capellari, Matteucci and Sangiolo, we've talked about them. And this is the newcomers to the squad in the Belmondo Racing outfit. And the cars profoundly the same, all bright yellow with the 2 white stripes, very Chrysler factory looking stripes down the centre of the car, but all 3 bearing a different number of their sort of raft of sponsors, so you'll have a different main sponsor on depending on who is driving which of the cars. And the V12 Howl of the Ferrari goes past our commentary position here at the exit of the final turn, being in the pit lane, which means that Fabien Giroir and Jean-Denis Delatraz, one or the other, is back out on track again. They've now clocked up a dozen laps, which is as many as the listers have. They've done 11 and 13 each, but certainly considerably less than some. We're into the 20s. In fact, the 11 car, the sister car to this machine in Belmondo's outfit, the Gosselin and de Richebourg cars, done 22 laps already. And bearing in mind that they're taking 1 minute and 40 seconds, sort of on average, or 1 minute and 35 seconds to get round a lap, then that's not bad. They've done 22 laps, 23 laps in the 45 minutes as the checker flag comes out, so they will do no more. The Ferrari will just reel off this last one before it comes back in, as will everybody else now who crosses the line. The Marcos leading them through, and there you can see Hugh Chamberlain centre a picture discussing the handling of the car with Tony Seiler, and the Swiss sharing with Nee Annerim in Hugh's with Walterbrunn in Hugh's number 2 machine. Tony Seiler and Walterbrunn in the number 2 car on 7th position, and Nee Annerim and Stephen Watson, the young South African, in 8th place ahead of Franz Conrad, Jürgen von Gartzen. Then the Kaufmann and Wallick car number 3, run by Freisinger Motorsport, their lead entry. Their second car, incidentally, we haven't talked about, we didn't see it, Yukihiro Hane and Ernst Palmberger. So Freisinger Motorsport staying with their familiar lineup of drivers, or familiar group of drivers, as is Hugh Chamberlain. Most of his drivers seem to come from the same pot, depending on where the race is and who seems to have the finances there. The drivers that get on with Hugh and that Hugh gets on with come back to him time and time again. 19 car, Christian Van then, and Cor Reuser at the wheel of this car. Christian Van doing the last stint here, and they are currently in 5th place on the timesheets. I hope to give you a final rundown in the last couple of minutes of our broadcast before we go to Portugal for the live motocross. And that's the way they look after the first of 2 qualifying sessions. And don't forget the later one, which will be showing you live from 5:30 to 6:30 Central European Time, 4:30 to 5:30 this Saturday afternoon in the UK. That is likely to be quicker, and it doesn't matter what tyres you use to set your time on either. You don't have to start the race on them, unlike the American Le Mans Series. So there you are, into the top 10 go the 2 Porsches we were talking about moments or 2 ago, Conrad and von Gartzen and Kaufmann and Wallick. And just outside, the Italian number 21 Racing Box Chrysler Viper GTSR, I don't know why I'm saying and then the slowest of the 3 entries for Paul Belmondo Racing is the number 10 car that we were just watching. So the fastest of the NGT cars, Christophe Bouchou, one of 3 ex-Le Mans winners in the field, with Gusala just ahead of the Ferrari. So the Ferrari looking reasonably competitive at the moment. It's down towards the tail of the big front-engine cars, but still in amongst the Porsche 911 GT2 cars and ahead of most, if not all, of the NGT machines. But this is the car that currently sits atop the timesheets. Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter, and the NGT machines will be chasing their own championship this year. We'll be back for the second qualifying session, 5:30 Central European Time, after the motocross from Agueda in Portugal. They are qualifying in 2 groups there. We're going to Agueda now live with Jack Bernicle for the first group, and after our second qualifying session we will return to Portugal for the second qualifying group from the World Motocross.